Hey, so at the moment, I am working on a new piece that I plan to post to my Substack probably in a couple of weeks from now. This piece is going to be about the upcoming 10th anniversary of Ben Zeller's book, Heaven's Gate America's UFO Religion. Along the way, while I was doing some research earlier this morning, I came across that Zeller's book came out on October 31st, 2014. So in a couple of days, that'll be exactly 10 years ago. So I wanted to write a piece sort of commemorating the anniversary of this book, which is really like this is kind of the definitive text on Heaven's Gate from an academic perspective. And I wanted to really talk about why that is and why this book has enjoyed a certain appreciation amongst people like myself who are interested in continuing Heaven's Gate research. It's also a book that everyone who is sort of a Heaven's Gate history buff, as I would describe it, people on the Reddit, on the Discord, and so forth, people that tune into Sawyer and Kathy's streams, people that are, always still, trying to track down new information or unheard of information about members of this group. There's a lot of people out there that are just really fascinated in the history of this religious movement. And Zeller's book is one that pretty much everyone, even if they haven't read it, they're aware of it. And many of the ideas in Zeller's book and in some of the articles that he wrote in the years leading up to the book's publication, many of these ideas are now kind of just part of the conversation around Heaven's Gate. And he's somebody that I definitely have a lot of respect for. He's somebody I have met, albeit on Zoom once, and I've talked to him a couple times over email. And I really like his approach to this topic. And I think a lot of the people that are really interested in Heaven's Gate that I'm friends with or that I've spoken to feel the same way. And I know as far as some of the members of Heaven's Gate or Heaven's Gate believers that are alive today, whether new or old, I think they are definitely very critical of many of the things that Zeller has said. But it does seem like they are much less critical of him than they are of many, many other academics. And I'm not going to name names here. But that's really interesting to me, is how has his work sort of impacted the conversation around Heaven's Gate? What exactly is the thesis of this book? What are some of the things that he argues for that have kind of, been, sort of embedded into the broader conversation around this group? And one really important thing to think about too is how did this guy who is, an academic kind of become one of those people that if you've ever seen a documentary on Heaven's Gate, you have seen Dr. Zeller and his trademark bow tie, and you have heard him talk about Heaven's Gate in probably pretty much any major Heaven's Gate documentary in the last several years. That's really interesting because it's kind of like before Zeller, there was a lot of academic work being done on Heaven's Gate, but there was not that much inclusion of academics in popular media about the group. And that also too is something I've been thinking a lot about is what kind of media has been created about Heaven's Gate in the last 20, I can't do math, 27 years, 27, almost 28 years. One of the things I was looking at this morning, sort of a weird rabbit hole I started going down, was I actually started looking up videos about Heaven's Gate that were published to YouTube between specific dates. Like I started with the day YouTube was created, which was February 14th, 2006, and I blocked it off right before the publication of Zeller's book. I wanted to see what kind of media was being created in that time. And then I opened it up to what kind of videos were being put out about Heaven's Gate after the publication. And I set the date between 2014 and 2017 which was the year that the Heaven's Gate HBO documentary came out. I think it probably borrowed a lot from some of the discussions that were already happening, but I think it also probably set the tone quite a lot. And if nothing else, it certainly reinvigorated interest in the group, because you start to see a lot of media start coming out after that documentary, much of which is really, really repetitive and unfortunately does not really add much value to the conversation. I'm sorry to say, but we do not need a new Heaven's Gate documentary being released every week, which is kind of the case on YouTube. I mean, if you look up Heaven's Gate videos that are being put out on YouTube and you filter by newest, like, you will see that there is a new video claiming to be a Heaven's Gate expose, or the full story of Heaven's Gate, or the tragedy of Heaven's Gate, or like literally that's like the title of dozens of videos. It's just all these same kind of titles recycled over and over again, and the same content basically being recycled over and over again. Nothing new is really ever in any of these like new exposés and new coverages of them. And it's great that people are interested in it, but I'm not even going to say that this is cynical. I think this is just realistic. A lot of people are just trying to get views. So they see, oh, this is a topic everyone talks about, so let me make a video about it. And, don't put any like work into it. Don't try to come up with anything original, or, do any kind of like independent research or criticism or analysis. Don't add any insight. Of course, God forbid, we don't want to do that. We just want to keep regurgitating the same shit over and over again, right? Because that's what scholarship is about. No, it's not. It's not even entertainment. It's like just junk food for your brain. Yeah, I kind of went off there. That's a whole other subject too. It's just the kind of stuff that gets sort of the less valuable stuff that is just sort of like put out like constantly about this group, that really doesn't add anything to the conversation and really doesn't forward the discussion. And Zeller was an exception to that. His book was an exception. His book, and even his articles that he published, in the decade or so leading up to the book, he challenged certain narratives that were at the time were prevailing. And that's something I would like to talk about in this piece. At the moment, I have a couple of essays that he wrote, one of which he actually sent me personally about a year ago. Was his first paper that it wasn't the first paper he ever wrote on Heaven's Gate, but it was the first one that was published in a peer-reviewed journal. And this was the paper, Scaling Heaven's Gate, Individualism and Salvation in a New Religion, I think is the full title. So there's that paper where I'm going to talk about some of his ideas there, and also the euphemization of violence. One of the things that I'm not really sure at this particular moment what direction I want to go in with this, and I think I maybe need to kind of dig a little bit deeper into some of his other papers. But one thing I'm starting to notice is he seems to be kind of going back and forth on how he feels about the Nettles' death explains the suicides hypothesis. In the 2006 article, he says very explicitly, he says, this moment cannot be overemphasized. And then in 2011, he's kind of saying, a lot of scholars like Balch and Taylor, Lalick, Lewis, he includes as well. He says, some of their work he feels had kind of carved the history of Heaven's Gate up into two periods, and that this moment where Nettles died sort of forced the group to what Zeller calls modify their belief system. And that's kind of what he seems to be arguing against in the euphemization of violence. He's saying he doesn't look at it as a modification of an earlier belief system. Rather, he sees it as something for which there were clear roots even in the earliest stages of their history. So going all the way back to when Nettles was still alive. Essentially something that we would be able to trace the origins of the eventual introduction of suicide as a viable act to take. Um, yeah, even though this introduction came later, he's saying basically we can see like the roots of this all the way from the start. But then again, in America's UFO religion, a few years after that, um, he does seem to still kind of maintain that like the the death of Bonnie Nettles was a major moment. What I'm assuming that I'm not getting is that there's probably some nuance here that maybe I'm missing, because that is kind of a nuanced position to take, because he's not totally rejecting he's not rejecting at all the idea that there was a shift in their theology. He is pretty consistent on that, and that is something that I am increasingly becoming much more sympathetic to. This is something that I have been critical of, been very skeptical of. I'm still skeptical of certain iterations of this theory, but at the end of the day, when it comes down to did their beliefs change in some significant way, um, I would say so. That's my understanding, is that at some point in their history, they were not talking about suicide. In fact, they were saying we are not going to commit suicide. We are the followers are not going to have to die at all. And then 20 odd years later, they're saying, well, actually, no, we do have to discard our bodies. But in any case, yeah, I am excited about this piece. It's not going to be done in time for the actual 10th anniversary, which would be in a couple of days, because I think the day before the 31st is when I'm going to be releasing chapter 6 of In Search of Heaven's Gate, and that's going to be the last chapter. And I don't really want to release two pieces on Substack like back to back like that. And also, there's kind of sort of an addendum piece that I've been kind of toying with putting out, where I was thinking about putting that out like a week after I published chapter 6, where I talk about kind of my own approach, like the approach that I took in writing that series. So that would be kind of cool. And so then the week after that would be when I would publish this piece about Zeller's book, which is probably a good thing, because it gives me time to really make sure I get it to a point where I'm satisfied, and to a point where I would hope he would enjoy reading it. Because I do plan on reaching out to him by email, just to kind of check in and see, like, is there anything that he would want to say, like, hey, your book's been out for 10 years now, and you've been in quite a few big documentaries. How do you feel about that? Where do you see the discourse around Heaven's Gate at this point? What is your assessment of the book's impact on the scholarship around this group? So that'll give him time to get back to me, if he wants to, if he has anything he'd want to have added in there. And like I said, it'll give me time to really, make sure I get it to a point where it's something I would feel, good about putting out for other people to read and enjoy. So that's what I've been working on. That's what I've been working on today. I put in quite a bit of time on that today, and after I got home from work, I just needed to kind of chill and do some other things, listen to some music, and yeah, it's good to have balance. So that's what I've been up to today as far as Heaven's Gate research and writing goes. Hope you enjoyed listening to me share some of these little kind of behind the scenes thoughts and projects and stuff like that. Thanks.